St Mystere, a wonderful town full of perplexing puzzles, suspicious streets, and curious characters. The little village where the Layton legacy first began way back in 2007. Well, actually it began on this rural lane, but we'll never get to finding that. And so, if you haven't already guessed it, in today's episode of Another Puzzle Solved, we'll be cracking the case of the curious village itself. Or at least, just where it is in the UK. Except, just like in the search for Stansbury, St Mystere doesn't line up with any national transport network. To make matters even more complicated, very few residents actually speak, either in cutscenes or audio lines, so we can't use a dialect to pinpoint a location. Lady Dahlia's map of the area looks like it was drawn by a toddler, and with Reinhold Manor being a surname of German origin, we couldn't use that to try and link to an area. And while it was always going to be physically impossible to find a town in the UK surrounded by a moat with a giant architecturally unstable stately stronghold in the middle, it might still be possible to find something similar. And so, without any further ado, let's crack this case. Like always, we needed to start off with a list of requirements that could line up with the St Mystere in-game. I decided that in order for a town to be our St Mystere, it needed a tall building or structure that stood out amongst the town. As discussed in Perplexing Paragliders, the height of the tower is approximately 175 feet tall, which can be figured out using the heights of doors and the heights of different rooms in this map of the tower. The building and the town also needed to comply with the 1960 theory, the year that the events of Curious Village are based on. Additionally, the town needed 2 pubs, a hotel, a manor house, a river nearby, and to be surrounded by hills, particularly behind the tower building. Now, this episode of APS wouldn't have actually been possible without the new cutscenes featured in Curious Village HD, specifically the scene of Layton and Luke driving over Tower Bridge, as this gives us an idea of the direction they're travelling in. However, what we don't know from just this shot alone is whether they drove onto the bridge from the north or south side of the Thames. But thankfully, there is a solution. At the beginning of Pandora's box, we see what is the only map of London scaled out enough to compare it to real-life London. This shows where DearestHershel is within London, around about where 9 Earlham Street, Westminster is in the real world. As seen in the cutscene, Layton drives away from DearestHershel, and this proves that Layton would have driven onto Tower Bridge from the north side of the Thames. If we wanted to, we could even plot the route that he took to get there. Now, knowing that Layton drove onto the bridge from the north side of the river heading south, we can understand which areas of the UK the pair are travelling to, the southeast, specifically the counties of East Sussex and Kent. Using this information, we can now scour these 2 areas for any structures that could pertain a similarity to the tower, and then look at the towns they're in to see if they match up with the various requirements of St Mystere. Although, no matter where I looked, there was nowhere that contained a list of all the tallest structures in these areas. And so the only way to complete this step was to search through every single town and village in both counties until I found what I was looking for. And this took hours. But after several hours of searching through various Wikipedia articles and hundreds of pages of Google Images, I finally had a list of 26 buildings across East Sussex and Kent that could potentially be our Tower of St Mystere. As previously stated, it was obvious that none of the buildings were going to serve the same function as the tower in St Mystere, and the list I'd compiled included churches, castles, industrial structures, oast houses, and windmills. I began by looking at what I could eliminate from the search, starting with the churches. At various points in the series, we can see that religion has been established, and some cutscenes even include places of worship themselves. Knowing that the Tower of St Mystere isn't used for this function, this removes 5 locations from our search. Next up, I eliminated all the windmills, as the lack of sails on St Mystere's tower wouldn't have made a realistic comparison, and I also removed all the oast houses from the search, as these were purpose-built houses for moulding hops used in the production of beer, and all followed the same architectural design, which can't be seen anywhere in the tower. This just left us with 8 places: Allington, Ashford, Faversham, Sheerness, Tonge, Battle, Lewes, and Brede. The first to go was Garrison Point in Sheerness, being a former artillery fort on the east coast of Kent. Its coastal location was the primary reason for its disqualification, but the height of the building is only actually achieved with a navigational radar control tower, which was installed in 1962, 2 years after the events of Curious Village. Also on the theme of industry, our next reject was the Brede Waterworks in, you guessed it, Brede. This location was eliminated because it was far too remote to resemble St Mystere and didn't have enough of the established requirements nearby to compare it to our desired town. Similarly, Tonge Mill could also be eliminated here too, due to its remote location outside of Sittingbourne. Next to go was International House in Ashford, a large office building that wasn't completed until 1974. It's also ugly AF. This just left us with 4 locations: Allington Castle, Faversham Guildhall, Battle Abbey and Lewes Castle. Each of these locations was already established in 1960, was close to 2 pubs and a hotel, and had a park and a river nearby. The only thing that separated the winner from the other 3 towns was the geography of the land nearby, the hills we had so desperately been searching for. And so I can now reveal that the location of St Mystere, or at least the closest thing to it, is Lewes. Lewes is the county town of East Sussex and is a traditional market town surrounding the aforementioned Lewes Castle in the town centre. And my God, is it a curious place indeed. Not only is Lewes home to the World Pea Throwing Championships, it also has a strong tradition of dwyle flunking, you know, the classic game of dancing around an opponent while avoiding a damp rag. The town also has several pubs and hotels, a river running through it and several parks throughout the streets. And while it is quite a bit larger than the version Layton and Luke visit in the game, there's enough here in common for us to make a link between the 2 locations. And so, with St Mystere now back on the map, that right there is another puzzle solved.